I'm going to, I got to turn on, you can share screen. So now it's all you.
Okay, cool. Really great to have this opportunity to just kind of share some early things and to Christine's point, sort of non-expert kind of trying to share stuff. So I'm just kind of jumping in. I'm going to share a little bit shortly about I can share an artifact that I created, which is an annual report for a learning and development consultancy from the year 2029. I was inspired by Julian's annual report for Omada, which is that an actual, like, are you actually building watches, Julian? Like, is that an actual company that you're building
That was
watches?
that was a real company that made, it wasn't a watch, it was a bicycle computer,
A bicycle computer. Yeah, yeah.
a few years ago.
Uh, and then also by Dre, who's ACDC, active commitment to daily creation piece. Like I'm just like, you know what? I'm just gonna try to make shit and just get it going. A bit about me. I'm here in Hamilton, just outside of Toronto. Um, I've spent this sort of past 7 years doing a lot of human-centered design work as a teaching professor in a department of medicine at local university, McMaster University. And I don't have a medical or health science background. My background's sort of formally graduate wise in education, constructivist learning, spiritual and contemplative education, expressive arts, facilitation, sort of a lot of the interpersonal and inner world kind of development. And now sort of transitioning out of my time at the university, thinking about doing a lot of stuff around capacity development, supporting organizations and designing curriculum and programs that sort of build some of these skills around futures literacy, thinking about AI, and really the emotional impact that all of these upheavals are having. Like, how do we actually teach and learn in this new world? So I'm starting up my own consultancy, and so I thought this artifact would be a really great way for me to exercise my imagination about like what I might be up to in 5 years from now, as kind of a self provocation to stretch me. And this was, it was actually pretty tough to do, but it got me in some interesting places. And I thought, I mean, rather than sort of like tell and take you through it, I'm wondering, like, I don't know if you've done this before, Julian and others, but like I can drop the link in the chat and give folks, I don't know, like 5 minutes to kind of explore it on your own. And I don't want to kind of like, talk about it. And then I mean, I've got some questions, right, which are kind of, broadly about, what makes for a really interesting kind of artifact in this area, right? It's an annual report. This is the kind of company. What would make it generative and make you feel something, right, when you read it? Like, I'm really curious about that. And sometimes education can feel kind of intangible if you're dealing with mindset development and behavior change. And so thinking about like what are the artifacts that are going to exist in that future, or are things that I'm kind of curious about. And so I don't know, like maybe I can drop it in the chat and give folks some time to look at it, and then I mean I would love some conversations and feedback. Like,
Would it
has that
would it be okay for you to share it here so we're kind of like collectively looking at it and
great?
maybe just kind of like, because there's no, so it's totally informal. So, even if you're like unprepared can be good in terms of just sort of showing the thing and just pointing out things that kind of reflect you, so you don't have to be like top down, here's my tight, presentation. So you're wondering around it, and we can wonder with you. And normally, well, normally what we've done this twice before is it's like my idea. I'm terrible with structure, but I thought like 10-minute share, 20-minute feedback. Well, we can kind of blend that and see what happens. So as you're
Great.
going through, yeah, okay, cool.
Okay, so you folks can see that there, I imagine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
John, I had one question at the start. You described a goal as generative, and in its simplest definition, I assume of is this causing us to generate ideas on our own, or did you have another mind of generative?
So generative in the sense that we're all collectively thinking about what is the future of learning and development, and what kinds of futures in that area feel like they connect with you in some way. And so what questions emerge there what ideas emerge there, and really in a creative mode, what kinds of things can we create, whether they're like stories or stuff that feel like they capture the essence of that and can kind of bring it forth in a really rich way. And ideas that you have about that, I mean, collectively, like would love to hear. Does that
Thanks, man.
help? Okay, great. So I mean, annual report format here, thinking about strategies and history, a bit about the company, even getting into like the statements, what are the offerings that I have. I'm going to sort of share a bit about this AI thing I created called SenseWeave, and who's on my team, and what's our kind of outlook. So table of contents, and here we go. So letter from me in 2029.
That's the picture that's close to what's on. So the part's all different. Your hair part's all different.
Yeah, it's all changing. So the world is different. It's in transition. Really 2025 asking us to hold paradox, speed and slowness, right? Collapse and emergence, fear and fierce imagination. And what if, my company Map and Territory, here's an opportunity, right? Where we get a chance to learn to improvise, let go of what we know. And what does it mean to show up with a full heart? So thinking about learning in this way is not just a luxury, but a lifeline. Thinking about organizations, AI saturated workflows, trust vacuums. How do we bring forth the relational, felt, poetic capacities to navigate change? And so, here we are helping a decentralized health system design collective recovery rituals after burnout. So, we need new ways of creating meaning together. Thinking about new ways of having dialogue together that rejects binary frames, like new ways of being able to hold perspective. And yeah, here we need facilitators and learning choreographers to support this kind of work, right? Holding the grief and the joy and some creative ruckus. So here we are, new tools, new methods, but really thinking about how do we bring our full selves into the work, right? To support transition. So here's a little bit from me in the future. And just feel free to sort of like jump in, and if there's things that sort of stand out to you or questions, let's do it. Okay, so really, what's the mission and vision? Thinking about learning as a catalyst for systems change, imagination, creating agency, and creating learning experiences that future ready, embodied, and affirming of life. And here the real focus is on rethinking the tools and the methods of learning to support that possibility for imagining new worlds and taking action. So there's my tagline there: learning where imagination meets impact. And just kind of tracing a bit of a history from 2025. I'll sort of zoom in there. Thinking about new programs that support learning for emergence, developing field studios that allow us to sense into the future of what things like in healthcare, what healing and care delivery might look like. Thinking about bringing people together to figure out how do we sort of do communal future making in the age of AI. So new kinds of gatherings that support doing that. And I mean, I'll just kind of keep moving through.
Let me ask you this, Sean. So who's reading this, do you imagine? Like when you were putting this together, who do you imagine? Keep going forward. I want to see more.
I'm imagining, I'm really imagining first and foremost, like who are the, education collaborators that want to work on this.
So, so you want this to do work, actually do work so what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about like, what do we want? What do you want this to do? Like, what's the success condition of creating this? Is it, there's part of it which, so when I did the Amida one, it was more an exercise for me. The success condition was, can I do something that I can print and have on the shelf to remind me of what I did and what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't intend for it to be to do the work that it did, which was something like, this is great. I'll buy the company.
Yeah. I'm thinking a lot about who are the kinds of folks that I want to start to collaborate and create with around new forms of education.
Yeah.
And can this be a way of supporting a conversation for us to imagine, like, what are the new things that we're going to need to be able to deal with some of the challenges that we're facing today? So, I mean, I've been sharing it with some of my close collaborators and friends and saying, like, what stands out from this as
Mhm.
something that you would want to kind of work together on? Like, I don't know. It feels sort of nebulous about what I might actually do.
Yeah. So let me ask you this along that and back uh to Bergman's point earlier, have you found ways to insert the graffiti on the bathroom stall kind of thing where it's like the challenges, represent the challenges of the future that you don't necessarily people don't know, necessarily, except in video games and dystopic science fiction, do they say show ways in which things don't work out the way we hope? It's just a question. I'm not
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I've done. I
always
don't know if I've done
stumbling in 2027, for example. I don't know what they are, but the thing that we overcame something, or what are the ways in which you kind of place these little signposts that this is a lived world, like the graffiti in the bathroom stall.
Yeah.
There's tensions and interesting forces at play that are left to you leave it to the imagination to wonder. So in the first person shooter, if you go into the bathroom because you're like, oh, see what's going on in the bathroom, and you see someone has graffitied a big Z on the wall, you're like, huh, I think I saw that someplace else. What's going on? The Z was a weird thing. I don't know if they figured out what it was that appeared on the Russian tanks in Ukraine. And people are like, what's that about?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thanks for that question. Yeah,
So,
that's
Just a thing.
like a stretch for me.
I have a kind of a follow-up to what Julian just asked, which is um, the first question I have when I look at this is who are the persona? Come from a sales background, right? So I'm thinking, who do I want to target to sell something to? Am I talking to the right person? Who are you trying to talk to within the organization? And in 5 years, will there be new roles that you need to imagine that exist that you'll connect with?
Yeah, and I mean, just to give you an example, so yesterday I was beamed into Ottawa. There was 100 people who had gathered to reimagine the future of aging for sort of like a collective sort of health model. And um, I worked with a woman named Zaina Kayat, who's a health futurist. I don't know if any of you know her. Anyways, what we sort of did was we created scenarios of sort of aging and some artifacts around the personas, and um, uh, really sort of working with that community to sort of, first of all, like, what does it even mean to imagine a different kind of future? And I mean, I guess I sort of saw like all the like tech glitches that kind of played out in trying to like facilitate these conversations, and because things broke down and it had to rely on sort of analog, but then people kind of muddled through and came up with ways to sort of figure it out. So there was something around, like, even with that sort of large group sense making context, like I am thinking about people within the healthcare system as really wanting to do this kind of work. Um, and that's not necessarily clear in this. And so it kind of leads me to think, like, how could I, in this kind of format, make that stand out more as a story? Like, what would be interesting?
Hey, Sean, I have a quick question. I'm curious, when you were selecting or thinking about how to depict people in some of these futures. I see in the beginning we had the picture of people kind of sitting in what looks like a half circle or an arc, people standing in front of a board or a wall with Post-its and so forth. So going back to where you talked about wanting to kind of bring heart, more relational aspect into education, I'm curious if you've given any thought to what are the ways that people may embody that in the future? What new gestures, what new ways of signifying through movements? Has proximity to what feels comfortable standing next to people change? I mean, are like why are folks still using Post-its on a wall as opposed to perhaps interacting with each other in some unique way, you know?
Yeah, a future in which there's touch, right? Healing,
Mm.
for example, like there's a lot of taboo around touch, but we know
Sure.
our oldest healing methods involve music. They involve touch. That's I think that's a really great question. How do we show that? Because this is, I mean, back to the thing around the past. I mean, these are photos from my own, like my
Sure,
own work
sure,
with people, right? And
sure.
so recognizing the constraint that kind of brings to what I can imagine.
Yeah. And also too, I mean, not to lean into it too much, and I don't say this as a judgment, just an observation. Even how these constraints may lead to norms that we perpetuate even in the imagery, right? Like everybody can stand up. Everybody has 5 fingers, 5 toes, right?
Yeah.
And not that it has to encapsulate some sort of let's make room for everybody in the picture, but just to see what we're kind of putting in the forefront and what's kind of left out sometimes speaks to more to what we're actually showing. Um, so yeah, it's something to think about.
Yeah, thanks.
There's a strange tension this brings up for me, Rodney, and how you want, like, I'm thinking of it as the Overton window, what's accessible to people, and the image communicates immediacy and hopefully identification. But if it's too strange or too futuristic or too far out, you lose people. So there's this kind of interesting, whatever, uncanny valley where you can see the future, but you can identify with it too.
Yeah, like how do you anchor the strange and the familiar in
Yeah.
the way that is generative, that it does shift and nudge and gets me to ask new questions in different ways.
I think what's really sort of a sad thing is how media and television created a nuclear family model that is completely considered, safe for kids, or PG-12 or whatever they call it, like ethically non-confrontational, but it blunts and rounds off literally the whole human sphere by the time you're done, and then it creates an anchor in a space. It's like seeing a bad residential community that's getting historically anchored as an architectural prize in some way. It's like, why are you guys saying we need to move past these icons, not reinstall them.
Hey, Sean, can you actually, I take back my thing about sending the link. Could you send the link just so um, we could scroll through it asynchronously? Because
Yeah.
I do want to, wait, is there more? Is there more? Is there more?
Yeah. I have some observations about the page that we saw, the 27, 28, 29, where you're talking about organizations, you're talking about events. In real life, organizations have locations, they have times. So there was an October 2028 event, and it was in Pittsburgh, and a lot of the time people will fail to resist the temptation to make a dumb in joke about something funny that happened to everybody there, and so there are lots of things that are sort of silly details, and those can be resonant with what's sort of familiar today, but there are also really interesting opportunities for what Julian says, wait, what about in terms of slight twists that imply sort of implications to the future that aren't immediately obvious, that you can kind of point with.
So are you saying that it could be interesting as saying in 2028, we had this event, and kind of zooming into some granularity about what that event sort of looked like and happened that had something to it that was a bit of a twist? Is that what you mean?
Well, it starts with imagining the event and the detail, and then describing it at one level less than you have resolved. You know, the idea with characters and props and things like that is you want it to be just a little bit too detailed for people to ever start to see the seams. And so if you know what happened in Pittsburgh in 28, then you can point to it, and people will feel that richness. Without having to put the full paragraph and things like that, as long as it sort of feels clear that it's there for them. If they were to make further inquiries about it, then that kind of constructs a successful fiction.
Love it. Wow. Yeah, that's great. I haven't been to Pittsburgh.
Neither. I'm sure it's fine.
I'm in Hamilton, which is a steel town, so it would make sense that I would go to Pittsburgh to do something. All right, I'm gonna keep scrolling on. I mean, I may imagine you folks are now sort of digging into it. But I mean, this is just really some text around some priorities. And this is part of this is sort of my own working out my own thinking around, you know, what do I want to be focusing on? And I sort of got stuck here on thinking about how to bring this forth in a richer way, because it stands out to me as a bit abstract. You know, so deepen in place, like what does that mean? Is there a way to talk about where I am and where I'm from here in Hamilton? Right? How can I communicate that? Is one question that I've got. I went through the task of creating some financial statements. I mean, I no idea what money's going to be worth in 4 or 5 years from now, but trying to think, like, if I'm going to make it, if this is going to be a business, like, what does this even mean or look like? Where can I imagine there being value being generated from? What are my expenses going to be? And so I have a curiosity here around how are we imagining value being generated and symbolized, right? This is sort of within, yeah, go Ticats. Yeah, this is within money. Like, and are there other ways of thinking about what a value statement or financial statement will look like that will reflect something a bit different?
Yeah, were you able to get there? 'Cause- so this looks, so I like that you have this. And I think it's worth going through the kind of speculative financial fictions as much as the design fictions. And so I'm wondering, like, were you able to imagine like either an evolution of our trad forms of value exchange, which is like you create something and someone gives you folding money?
I mean, it's hard given like where I'm at is having just left kind of the full-time position in the university, and you know, being in a position where you know income is top of mind. There's that the fear that comes with like, okay, well, what if I'm thinking about value coming in different ways for me and for others? There is a letting go and a reimagining that comes from a different place of, you know, not thinking about financial scarcity. So that's kind of where I got to in my mindset, like thinking about what this could look like.
Yeah, I think that there also may be ways of where it's not like all of a sudden everything is just trading cowrie shells or crypto or something. But you know, like they like little maybe I don't know what it is, and I'm not saying that you're missing something necessarily, but I'm wondering, you know, are the little ways that can be snuck in a sense, like to indicate that maybe one line of business, and it might be the smallest one. It's like it was only $16,000 of value exchange operating under you know Canada um, tax code 473/12, which is something like, wait a minute, so something else is different, and maybe and maybe it's not, I don't know. You can imagine a world in which it's like, if you do that, well, which I mean, it doesn't happen today. If you do something like, I don't know, you do something pro bono, maybe there might be there could be tax codes still operating within the world of, money, and still assuming that, like, what's the line? Of course, it's called money because everyone wants it. That's why it's called money, something like that. Um, so there's still money. There hasn't been a complete rupture, but there's some tax code that gives extra benefits beyond what we anticipate today. Just like, people with major stacks give money to museums, maybe because they like art.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so there's something still working within an existing financial system, but that it has at least a little bit of room for imagining, okay, there's a different way of accounting for.
Something has changed. Something, a little something has changed. Neither you nor I have figured it out, but there's a little tweak. There's a way in which you, with the nomenclature in a footnote, can indicate that this is a new kind of accounting practice that accounts for value, not in terms of gold bullion or folding money, but in terms of something slightly different.
Just to build off of that, it brings to mind for me, how years ago you could register as like a benefits corporation, right? With the like triple bottom line. So it wasn't just financial, but also the social impact, that you may be having on the community. And I wonder in the future, what comes up for me, just based on what Julian's saying, like, what if there's a way to not just focus on the outcome or impact of what happens downstream, but if there was a way to be accountable for what happens upstream in the value chain, thinking about AI hiring folks from different countries, and then, folks getting traumatized because they have to look at all the bad stuff, right? Before it goes out to the public. That's more upstream, not so much the use of AI downstream. And what if there's your idea of relational, maybe that carries over into the value exchange in different ways.
Yeah, and I'll just put something in the chat that's sort of related. Is a friend of mine runs a social venture exchange out of our innovation hub in Toronto called the Social Venture Exchange, and the sort of investing for impact kind of framework. So trying to account for that all of those different bottom lines, including meaning, and they're trying to create a kind of a market for that for people to invest in, and it has its own nomenclature, and so I might even consider looking at things that are local to me like that.
Rodney, I love this question. It's what pops in my mind is the equivalent, but in short, impact statements. You could almost imagine the exact same structure as this, and there's an assigning of the value to the impact statements. So imagine something replaces revenue under impact. So 674, 332. What if there was a way to assign value to that upstream and downstream complete picture? For me, as part of my work in international relations and studying international economics, I was always struck how we still leave out externalities, quote unquote, for simplifying, but those externalities were the game. So no, we can't talk about economic impact through the entire chain because that's too much to think about, is it? And so this is what you're reminding me of, Rodney, is that we kind of kick that can off to the side, but for this nonprofit, that for me is so much of the value statement here, that positive impact statement. I don't know what an impact expense would be. Maybe there's an impact revenue, and then there's an impact opportunity. There's sort of an impact market share that you have potential of, and one would show the revenue from it, and then maybe there's a rest of still to go. Anyway, just riffing off of your statements, Rodney.
Yeah, and I love that. If I could throw a little bit of cinnamon on that, like what also comes to mind based off of what you said, what if there is like a generative theme, like not only the impact, but perhaps you're inadvertently creating new categories in the market space. and maybe there are new revenue or pools of revenue streams that are like spores or strains based off of your impact. You know, kind of like this trace value sort of idea.
So one of the things we used to do in our pre-sales presentations is take a look at the client's existing infrastructure and, you know, what the ROI would be of implementing, you know, our solution instead. And one of the things that we did to drive that home was have an artifact that went along with the presentation that the you know, you listed out all the areas where you see impact, and then you ask the client to fill in the numbers of, you know, is it head count, is it machines, whatever it is, and what's the impact of on the financial bottom line of whatever savings you're going to come up with. So, you know, is there another artifact that you can create that lists those ideas that, you know, Rodney is talking about, and you know, give something quantifiable to look at instead of being intangible? Because I can tell you, I have a very hard time selling intangible to somebody who's looking at it, you know, for an ROI, you know, based on, you know, what their budget is. The second thing I just noticed, and I can't say I read every word of the this annual report, is that from reading through it, what I imagine is that what you're trying to do, and this could be completely off base, is be able to go into organizations that are spread out very maybe geographically and maybe, you know, siloed, and have a system, this this SenseWeave, and it allows people from different parts of the organization to talk about what problems they're experiencing in their areas, and have the AI link it all together, right? And come up with some suggestions about where you could be impactful in making some type of change. Now, if that wasn't what you were going for, I'm sorry, but that's just kind of what I got out of it.
Well, one of the threads to this is with a colleague of mine around second order cybernetics and complexity, is really kind of an attempt to describe how nature works, and recognizing that the kind of thinking that it takes to think in the circular epistemology, if you will, of that, is at the root of many of the, not being able to do that is at the root of many of the challenges that we have. We're sort of stuck in very linear mechanistic thinking. And so recognizing that we need support in being able to think in those kinds of ways that more align with how nature works. And is there ways to reframe the conversations that we're having in organizations to help sort of show us that the ways that we're thinking about problems, the way that we're framing them is a challenge, and we need some provocation for that. So that was the sort of like inspiration for this SenseWeave kind of thing that sort of does poetic remixing and metaphorical reframing of the conversations that are happening in organizations through, you put in voice notes and narratives, and, you know, get a more, to borrow Nora Bateson phrase, transcontextuality, right? That we're actually able to see issues as being a multitude of contexts that are not fitting into categories that we sort of put in. But, you know, when you talk about health, it has as much to do with ambulances and hospitals as it does as how the municipal bylaws are around the creation of curbs, and do people trip on them and break their arm, right? Like there's a lot of transcontextualities. So that was the essence behind SenseWeave as like an imaginary thing that would support organizations and being able to see beyond, you know, their own kind of bubble.
Mm-hmm. A call out to your reference to Neo4j.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, this is where I struggled a bit. I mean, with thinking about the tangibility of the sort of AI thing that would enable organizations to think. Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, it feels,
Here we go.
my general, who am I? I've known Julian not quite as long as
listen.
Eric. But I'm a architect, designer, been doing this stuff for a while. I think I don't know if you've done this exercise, but this reads a bit like a roadmap in the form of an annual report because of the way things are described. And I think you said early on that the audience is people you would like to join you in actually creating these things. Is that right?
Yeah,
Something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And so I think what you could do, because an annual report is not necessarily a rallying call to action format normally, but it could be. And I think one step I would take all of this material you've done that you have here and essentially do a backcasting exercise. So go, because this is only 5 years out. It's like it's tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
It's 2030. So go back, from 2030, work back, because the annual report talks about midterm stuff in a way an annual report wouldn't. Right? If this was the annual report from 2030, why is it talking about like it would talk about what we achieved this year. And you have like the history thing, which is a great place to say what you overcame, which is an invitation to anyone like, look, this dude already thought through the upcoming challenges. But if you can focus on the vision in 5 years and say what it's currently doing, and then use like a historical lens to say, we had to change our principles and values in as you recall, in 2028, we pivoted our values because of whatever thing you discovered in your backcasting activity and refocused on blah, blah, blah. Then it feels like it's situated in 2030. Right now, it feels very much today, still looking forward. It doesn't feel like a annual report thinking about the past year.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like, I think you already said, it's super text heavy. So that's the other challenge is if it's going to be a review of I don't know, I think maybe it can be different things. You can do an annual report version that says what you've overcome or something. And I don't know, I feel like some of these other nuggets are other nuggets. They're just like, you're like, here's my compass document for SenseWeave. Here's my, because you're still shaping it. So it's hard at the same time shaping
it's so early. It's so early.
You're doing two things at the same time, which is hard. So I'm thinking if you just try to keep in the one exercise, go to 2030 with whatever of this is 2030 stuff. And what people are contributing are awesome thoughts. Like what does getting together into, I don't know that I worked at IDEO for a decade. Post-it notes are not going away, at least if you're in person. Paper's not going away, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So like some of these things, and then I think as you work backwards, some stuff's going to drop out and you'll highlight the things that you overcame. And that's food for the annual report, right?
Okay. Yeah. No, it makes sense. I love it. Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Yeah. Does it almost feel like the direction might be like a presentation to a VC about where we intend to go and be in 5 years and why you should jump in? And
that's what it is now. I feel like it's more like that now. It reads more that way now, because I think that's partly where Sean is. Like, that's what you're like. It sounds like you're creating. I'm just from the little that you've said. It seems like you're embarking on this, and you've thought about it a lot. And now you're trying to give shape to it. So it's reading that way, literally. So you have to do that. But is there a way to? If you want it to be annual report 5 years from now, it wouldn't sound that way.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Just to
God, I was
build,
just gonna ask about your use of the word backcasting. And if you can just give an example of that, I'd appreciate.
Oh, sorry. Backcasting is, well, there's forecasting, which is now into the future, right? Backcasting is you go to the future. So this, I'm just assuming your future vision's 5 years out, 2030, and it's very counterintuitive, but you work backwards in whatever increment makes sense, essentially asking what had to happen for this to be true. So you start at 2030 with some of the 2030 material, and it tests some of the stuff that's in the report. You're like, would it be like that or not? Or Julian or someone threw out like, is there, under will Carney still be in office? Maybe 5 years from now.
just to
We don't know. We don't
just
know.
to quickly build off of what.
So I don't know what
Scott's-
he's proposing, but
Yeah.
anyway, so you work backwards, piece by piece by piece, understanding
I've
what
got a
were
few-
the barriers. Yeah.
I have a few different ways to go around backcasting. I think there are some like foresight ways of doing backcasting that are pretty robust. It's like, figure out the end state that you're trying to get to and what's the immediate place you need to be before that. And then what do you need to be at before that? And what do you need to be at before that? And you take these incremental steps backward until you get close to your current timeline. And then you can see where you are in your current timeline. And the idea is like you shift to that position, and at least you've got an idea of the trajectory that you need to take. There's another thing that when I worked in advertising, when we worked on a campaign, I would start with the press release. I'd ask my creative team, like, what's the press release that the news is going to write about the campaign? And we would pitch that to the client, and then we would work towards that. And another good example is Amazon has a book called Start at the End, which is effectively the concept of writing the press release first.
Mm-hmm.
What would be interesting too, just to build off of what you said, Scott, which I love with the backcasting situation and what Dre was talking about. I think it'd be interesting to show how perhaps the business model had changed over time and what were some pivots, and also too discontinuity, because part of the problem with roadmaps is it projects a level of stability that is typically not reality. So you think about, Viagra when it first came out, it had to do with cardiovascular or whatever, it was a test, but the side effect, hey, how come people weren't returning the samples? Oh, we need to pivot because this is a good thing. So it'd be interesting to see in that backcasting, were there any wild card events or were there any discontinuities that happened that perhaps inspired the pivots or something like that?
So I have a few like go-to things that I love to do. Can you go to one of your slides where you're showing like financial projections? Yeah. So when I look at something like this, well, part of what I like about design fiction is sometimes there's like immediate things to grab your attention, and we're dealing with the future, and the future is pretty unknown, but there's some things that you can do. And to Rodney's point of like, what's something unintentional that may happen. I look at something like this. My first thing is like, okay, I'm going to change $sign to Robux,
Mm-hmm.
and I can backfill that. I mean, it seems absurd, and that I think that's part of the idea is like show something really absurd. But I like the idea of thinking, well, you have a whole generation of people today that are growing up on Robux. Like they would rather have digital things than physical things. Like digital supremacy is a thing, and Robux are worth more to them than dollars are because it buys them the thing that they want. You could go something even more practical like crypto and say, oh, everything's in Ethereum in the future, but I think Robux becomes more absurd, and it gets people asking like, how is that even possible? But then you have some kind of logic that you can backfill that allows you to like not suspend disbelief, but like embrace the absurdity of the future. And the future is quite literally absurd when you think of what's happened, what we were imagining in the past. Like I always love electronic cigarettes. Is that like if you told somebody in the 90s that we would be smoking electricity, like that seems like the craziest idea in the world. It feels like a science fiction idea, but no, it's totally commonplace. Nobody even thinks about it anymore. We have no vaping signs now. So yeah, change it to Robux, and you've just created a conversation piece that might expand the discussion.
And I think what's useful when you do things like that, is to have somewhere, maybe it's in the appendix, maybe it's like something that goes alongside of it. It's like the kind of out of world explainer, that kind of helps make it seem less, because people will look at it and be like, some people might look at it and be like, oh yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. But some people might be like, this never gonna happen, because I can't imagine a world without folding money. These Roblox things. Isn't that all a scam? Like they're gonna go directly towards, the Canterbury thing, just like, I don't know, people started jogging, people like, it's never gonna take off. It looks ridiculous. People look like they're in agony. Why would anyone want to do that? And so just to say, remind people, it's like, man, shit changes on a dime. You wake up one day and you're kind of like, wait, what just happened? And so, it's a way of kind of helping people into the world you're imagining. So it's a funny line, in the conversation, where Scott was sort of representing how the annual report, it has a particular archetype and people are going to approach it, and maybe you want a little bit of the, oh, well, wait a minute, oh, this is 2027, how do they, you want that little bit of beautiful kind of confusion, which isn't because you're trying to pull the rug out from someone, right? You're not doing it to laugh at them, be like, sucker. You're doing it because it's like, I'm trying to move you into this world, and I'm creating these little signposts and signals that you're in a different world. At the same time, you're close to the world that you expect because of the nature and structure of the annual report. It's got the sections you expect, it's got dollar signs and that kind of thing, but maybe a little bit of a thing where there's like an R with 2 lines through it. People are like, what's that R with 2 lines through it? Roblox, Robobucks, whatever they are. And so it's interesting because Christine put in the chat the example of a friend of hers, what was it, nonprofit, that did an annual report that was more like 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 a graphic novel kind of vibe. So it has all the archetypes of that kind of thing. And I think that sort of works in the context of like, no, we're actually an organization. We're just trying something different to get our readership into it, as opposed to I think they're two different subject positions, I guess, to be weird and academic and technical, which is like, this thing actually exists. We're just trying to get people more engaged in what we're doing, and thought that this would be, because of our spirit and sensibility, doing it as a bullet list in a regular Google Doc, we just know people aren't looking at it. And as Christine pointed out, it was the most downloaded thing, whatever, ever. Of course. And the same thing, who else did it? I mean, not tons, maybe a bunch of people did it. What was the games company that did their HR manual as a
Valve.
Valve. So Valve's HR manual, or whatever it was, employee handbook, was done as what was it, like a pulp paperback fiction kind of thing. And that works because they actually exist, and it also effervesces the playful, petulant spirit of a video game company. We're gonna not do what you guys do. We're not, whatever, Warren Buffett or some, IBM or something.
Yeah,
So I
this
think
gets. Oh, sorry, Julian.
No, go on, Scott.
I want to piggyback on what Dre was saying earlier about writing a press release now. Like the things people are identifying, like changing the currency or the format, etc. If you can identify these key things that are different, in my opinion, if they align with the kind of conceptual thing you're describing, like there's the educational project, which is, I follow the words, but not more than that. Like if they can align with that, like in 5 years, second order cybernetic, whatever organization, it would be this way. It would use different currency. It would buck tradition. It would la. if those are it only has to be a few things that are different, I think, to Dre's point. It doesn't have to be an exhaustive backcasting at all. But if it's a few of these key things, then you're now in the right place where they're like, okay, this is a different organization talking about what it's like in 5 years. And I think right now it's some of that, it's here, it's kind of in the middle.
When Dre mentioned Roblox, my brain is like, well, why would there be Roblox? And then Julian answered it. And it to me is about setting up a space where you can talk about, well, why is that R there? It's a little doorway into some whole part of the near future. And then that becomes an anchor for adjacency. Why would Roblox be the coin or Solana be the coin? Well, because Roblox is in gaming, and gaming exploded and changed the future for us, and financial statements have to be in Roblox now, or whatever the story is, but it creates a passage to the story.
Hey, Sean, can
It's a
you
good way to
remind
think of
us?
passage, you know, that kind of portal into that. Is
Yeah.
there a newspaper article from the Financial Times, you know, kind of justifying it or something, or characterizing it? Yeah.
I wonder if you could just take a regular financial statement and then just put question marks all over it, and then change the question marks sequentially to weird iconography that begged the audience to ask you, like, you know, an MPORG or you know, a multiplayer game.
Hey, Sean, I was going to ask if you could remind us, and forgive me if I missed it at the very beginning, your initial goal in creating this artifact, which has been really fun and cool, and you've been so gracious on all the ideas going back and forth. Thank you for being such a great audience member to that reflection on your work. Your initial goal when you created this, what was that for you?
Well, as it, you know, comes out here, it's also for me to imagine like what is kind of where I'm wanting to go for myself with this. So there is a bit of like a roadmappy kind of thing to it. But I wanted to, you know, also like I want to practice what I'm sort of thinking about here, which is like I need to start thinking about the future in these kinds of ways, because design fiction is really great shit. I love this stuff. And I also want to piece that brings people together to talk about like what is the future of teaching and learning, right? Like what's that going to look like, and who wants to make stuff with me? Like I want to create things. So what sticks? What stands out as things that people want to create? And so collaborators, other educators, are really who I've started first thinking about.
Hey, Sean, have you, I may have missed it, the gesture deck, have you talked about that yet? That might be in, yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, I run a lot of workshops and there's cards, and I find that sometimes the cards, sometimes I want them to be a little bit more dynamic and responsive to what's in the room. And I like making cards and card games and those kinds of things. So, are there ways of thinking about like a very standard material we use as educators in rooms, which are cards, without always being on a computer? So, and thinking about the embodiment piece, getting suggestions for gestures for how we might sort of attend to what's in the room that are more embodied. I definitely want to bring more embodiment. So that was the inspiration for the gesture deck.
I did a deep dive on that once, on gestures to use in video chats to signify different states of listenership and participatory, like steering using gestures. So it works in person as well, but it's, you know, I honestly can't remember a single one, but I did a whole typology of them at one point because it was an interesting idea just to add a new signal. Like I hold up my finger with a priority stack of how crazy, because I just put the idea in my finger, so then I can listen again. And yeah, exactly. And so that just means, you know, oh, it's over here, and then I can focus over there, you know. Yeah, and then yeah, exactly. So there's one.
You know what I like
in your honor there, Philip.
Yeah, exactly.
What I like about an artifact like this is that you can pepper in a lot of stuff. Like the artifact in and of itself is stuff, and then it can reference more stuff. When I'm doing a lot of thinking, I kind of think of like setting, situation, and stuff. You know, setting being obviously the world that you're living in, because it's all like world building components, and then the situation are like the scenarios that might happen within that setting, and then the stuff are all the things that live inside the minutia, and that can be nested within within itself. But what I like about stuff is that when you lock onto something that you have a good hunch, not that you're trying to predict or anything like that, but you've got this like, this is interesting, that item you can park and you can use it again, because I think part of design fiction is that you personally are starting to build a world from all the various stuff that you create from project to project. And with Design Fiction Daily, you'll notice the repetition of a lot of things because I liked how it worked in this one, and I think it should persist in the world, because I don't think we're done with it yet, and I'll keep doing that. And then, obviously Julian does the same thing with a lot of his work, referencing kind of like the same thing over and over again in different places. And I will latch onto something that he said, so that it becomes part of my world, because I think it works. And so it's also just a collection of stuff. As much as it lives in your report, you can park it on the side, knowing that this might live in the part of your letterhead, part of the news thing, part of another design fiction that is, the same world, or an adjacent version of the world. I think all these worlds are just like a multiverse of Venn diagrams that share with one another.
Yeah, and one of the things that Julian raised about your revenue slide made me think about that a little bit. You said that you could have a little line item, 10K here for something that was 476/2, and the kinds of things that you could do with that are pretty interesting in terms of pointing to and painting a world that has some things happen in it. So, like COVID had in the United States the Personal Paycheck Protection Program. There are going to be all kinds of different regulatory responses to the use or overuse or misuse of artificial intelligence. I know when I first signed my first United States employment contract, I was very alarmed to see how angry they would be if I ever supplied any sort of military technology to Syria, and I didn't realize that was a particularly relevant concern when I'm making websites to sell iPhones. So like there's a lot of opportunities to point obliquely to things that happen in that world, and for the, if you have to have sort of regulatory sort of disclosure statements, or to do with compliance with a specific Canadian program to keep artificial intelligence as satisfied and existentially happy or whatever, then those are some nice things to be able to kind of get at and play with.
Yeah.
One,
I see we're at 129 here, and Julian's got a 130 hard stop here Eastern. So I just want to say thanks. Like, hey, I just took a risk and just first time really doing something like this, and it's been really great ideas and questions. Thanks. Wow, I love this forum.
Appreciate you sharing, man. It's good
Yeah,
stuff.
likewise. It's so good.
I do have a hard out, unfortunately. Any last something or others?
One quick idea for you, Sean. This is awesome. It'd be great if you role played this with different audiences representing different Three Horizons from Bill Sharp. So you have some folks being H1 status quo, H2 innovators, H3 that future, and just role play it out.
Cool. I love it. Love that idea. Yeah, thanks. And Julian, if you got the transcript of this, hey man, that would be really awesome to.
I'll print it out and mail it to you.
I just want to say, because everybody's here, I took Dre's NFT idea and ran it through my n-dimensional pachinko machine last night, and want to talk to him more about any goals there. But basically, I need to talk to people about that. I'll talk to Dre first.
Sure. Julian, if you want to toss the keys in my direction, I'm happy to keep it going.
I can't because
Oh, you got a call. Check.
Got a call with but if you guys want to meet in the
Discord on the
in the
donut shop. Yeah, I'll pop into the donut shop.
All right, see you in the donut shop, guys.
And Eric, you don't know the Discord. If you want it, are you into Discord?
I think you sent it to me once, but I'm gonna have to drop right now too. But I want to thank you for inviting me to this. This is very interesting and appreciate the topics of conversation, just learning. So thank you.
This is very cool. It's so nice to see you, brother. I
Special
love this.
place.
Okay, you
All right.
guys.
Peace.